All right. So doing another review. I had seen this video during the day. Didn't get a chance to watch it. And I don't know what it is with certain red pill content creators that are coming out with material and really don't seem like they understand what they're talking about. Because if you've done any sort of traveling outside of the US, you immediately you immediately notice the difference in the attitudes of the women, right? In the US, attitude is important, and it's primarily what many men run into when it comes into the dating environment is that is just the obesity. Obesity is a huge thing in America. When you have such a high rate of overweightness and obesity, it makes it very difficult for you as a man, especially if you're a man who is in shape and then you go out into the dating environment and most of the women that you're coming across are typically overweight. While yes, there will be women who are in shape. You will come across many of them. But by comparison, into when you go to other countries, the obesity rates and the overweightness that you see here in the States is very different. And so this causes, like I said in my last video, you have an artificial environment because one, you have the laws that it favor women, you have society that highly favors women, and then on top of that, you have to deal with overweight and obese women that a lot of these men are competing with. From a male perspective, on the other hand, what really matters most is, of course, your social status, whether you have a good paying job or if you have your own business, if you do investing, obviously not just how you look, but then also how your body is. But if you're a man who has money, you can still pull beautiful women. But if you're an ugly guy and you don't have any, a nickel to your name, obviously it's that much harder to pull women. Now, from the perspective of women, a lot of that stuff really doesn't matter. Men aren't looking at women and being like, "Oh, she has a really good job," etc. Like, because a lot of that stuff, you don't even have access to when it comes to her finances. Most, especially in the States, like you really don't have access to women's finances like that, like the way they have access to your finances. Yes, will you come across women who will take you out to dinner? They're gonna buy you, maybe they'll buy you a gift. Yes, on a very rare occasion, you might find someone who, if times get tough, she's going to be supportive of you financially. That happens on a very rare occasion. But if it's few and far between, the biggest issue when it comes to traveling, which is what this video talks about, which we're going to go into in a second, is about whether or not if you choose to date outside of your own country, as the title of the video, it says black men who go overseas to date foreign women are simps with no game. I'm going to take a look at this video. There's a lot of shaming tactics that are used, which I'm surprised that men are utilizing female shaming tactics. But this is basically where we are, in 2020. 2020 has been a shitty year. And of course, we're coming out with shitty advice. So we're going to take a listen.
But it's my boy, Steve the Dean. Go ahead, Steve. Let everybody know who you are, man.
Steve the Dean Williams, not a content creator, but a dating coach. Been doing this for over 30 years. So thank you, Oshey, for having me on, brother.
All right, Steve. Now, we've been doing shows, me and you and LAR, and I'm trying to get back into the swing of things. Later on, guys have come in, in after that. But then you have these other guys who are like the travel black men, the guys who are going to Brazil, the Dominican Republic, yes, Colombias of the world, the Latin American countries. And a lot of those guys are saying that they don't need dating coaches anymore because they can just go overseas and find foreign women who are unlike the American women that are here that are full of feminism. Now, what is your response to that?
Now, of course, like he introduced himself in the beginning, that he is a dating coach, right? And so obviously if more men are saying I don't need dating coaches because there's more women who are attractive and the dating pool is basically better in terms of I have a wider selection now, and as a result of that, women are now having to do a little bit more than they normally would. Like, I mean, when you go overseas, if you've gone to many different Latin American countries, I mean, women don't just come with their looks; they also are very, the femininity is very different by comparison in other countries. A lot of these women have a lot of the home skills that the vast majority of American women just lack when it comes to simple things like like cooking good meals in the home. Most of these women, I mean, shoot, when I've gone overseas, I've gone out with young women, and I've had young women stay with me while I go overseas, and they have no problem. They have no problem cooking. That's like a given when you go out there. It's so weird when you go out overseas and you see the way women are, and you just like you just automatically think something is suspect because they're so accommodating towards men that you're just not used to that. And of course, in the video, they talk about that they're just trying to run game on you, and some of them will. Some of them are particularly looking for an American man because they want to leave where they are, and they want to come to the States thinking that the States are going to be better for them. But most of the women that I've come across, I would say, is few and far between. Out of 10, maybe one will want to come to the States. Most of them are looking to stay where they're at. And you can just ask them, like, are you looking to stay here? Or are you looking to come back with me to the States? Most of them will tell you no. You can just be straightforward. Like, if your goal is to move overseas, you can just be like, I have no interest in bringing a woman back. And the ones that I have met that were like, well, I'm looking to go to the States, they will literally tell you right on the spot. They will tell you while you're sitting there chatting with them, or if you're face to face with them, they will say, no, I'm looking for someone because I'm trying to make it to the States. And it's really easy. There's not a lot of BS that goes on when it comes to, as they talk about in the video, that she just chasing after you for a green card. That does exist, but typically most of those guys that happens to are typically simps, the ones who literally have no game, the overweight guys that lead with their money, that have absolutely no sort of self-confidence. They let women walk all over them, and if that's you, that's going to happen to you no matter where you go, whether you're here or whether you're overseas.
I think
No, realistically, if the person who's making these comments is a dating coach, and it's because people are saying I don't need a dating coach, and he's like, well, shit, how am I gonna make my money? Because I make my money off of you, and now you don't need me. Well, then it's to my advantage to go and tell you that, yeah, you still need me.
one of the biggest problems is kind of like what you said at the beginning, with everybody's trying to be a dating coach and everybody's being a content creator. You have a lot of people that give you theory versus truth. And anybody that says that you can go overseas and the women are going to treat you different than women in the States is just giving you theory, because the question you have to ask yourself, has he been overseas and dated every woman overseas to make that broad statement? That's the first thing you got to ask yourself.
That just doesn't even make any sense. You don't need to date every single woman in a country just to make an observation. You make an observation based off of the percentage of that you come across from a sample size. I mean, realistically speaking, statistics, just like, can you talk about hypergamy on every single woman if you haven't dated them? Like, this is some poor logic and reasoning that is being used.
Okay. So that's the number one problem right there. See, a lot of people don't understand is weak no matter what foreign language it is. Women can detect weakness, and just because you go overseas doesn't mean that you're not going to wake up in a bathtub with your kidney cut out. You know what I mean? So it's a dangerous ball game when you're looking, or these women coming over to get a green card just to get in the United States. So it's a bigger game out there than just saying you could go over there and meet women overseas, because at the end of the day, women can smell weakness.
And I think a lot of Americans overestimate people's desire to come to the States. It's not like how it used to be. America isn't this, golden streets, sort of environment where, the sky is the limit, especially nowadays for people who are watching the news. It's just not happening. There's not, the people who are looking to come here are typically the shady individuals. Women who are good looking, they're doing just fine where they're at. Believe me. A lot of these women are still meeting dudes who are going out there. You still find wealthy men who do traveling from different parts of the country, of Europe, Spain, even within places in Colombia, Buenos Aires. There's a lot of dudes out there that have money, that are living just fine out there. There's a lot of beautiful women out there who ain't looking to come all the way to the United States to come to New York, to put up with the cold, to live in an apartment. It's just not happening. A lot of these women aren't looking to leave their home of origin by themselves. to troop all the way out here for a green card, hoping to get lucky. Will you find a rare one? Sure. Is that something that you should even be worried about, that it's going to hit you upside the head? No.
When you say weakness, what do you really mean when you say women can smell weakness? Explain what these weaknesses are.
Okay, what happens is if you go all the way back to, you can go to elementary school, but I'll scoot it up to junior high school. You go to junior high school, most of these men today carry the same thing that they carried over in junior high school and through high school, and that is emotional type behaviors that women can figure out. No confidence, scared to talk to women, anxiety, all these things, fear, all these things they had in junior high school that they carried over into high school, that they carried over into life. And women can recognize certain behaviors in a guy, I won't say man, but certain behaviors in a regular guy based on not how much money he makes, not how tall he is, not his body, not his car, not his degree. They're looking beyond that, and they're looking at the behavior versus what they see in front of their eyes.
So let me ask you this then, because you said the weaknesses are no confidence, fear, scared to talk to women.
Yes.
A lot of these brothers are African American men. That's what I deal with, the
Yes.
Black community on this channel.
Yes.
So what a lot of Black men are saying is, well, the women in the Black community typically don't appreciate, men who are intelligent, men who do very well for themselves. And, I'm interested in, let's say Black women from another place. Could be in Africa, could be in the Caribbean, could be, Afro-Latino women. Now, when you talk about these sorts of women, they have a more appreciation for a Black man who's more intelligent, a Black man who's doing better for himself. And when I go over there, they're going to, have a better respect for me than, Keisha from down the block, in the Black community. What would you say to that?
I say absolutely not, because the appreciation is the game that they're going to run on the mark that comes into the country, thinking that women are stupid enough to think that he's not a mark, first off.
And this is something that I completely disagree with. I wanted him to finish his statement. See, the difference is within the Black community, and to some extent in the Hispanic community, is that in America, many of these communities rely on social programs, primarily the women, especially within the Black community. You have a lot of these communities that are literally propped up via social programs. If you've actually done any sort of research, the average person who is on a social program, especially here, like for example in New York, the amount of money that they take in terms of food stamps, having part of their rent paid for, having like their electricity paid for, having the government hand them out a cell phone for either free or really low cost. When you actually do any sort of research, the amount of support that they're given via social programs is in the neighborhood of about 55 to 58,000 in terms of value, right? Whereas the mean salary in America is about 55,000. So you have people who are on social programs that are earning, in terms of everything that they receive from like welfare, are earning more than your average man who is out there earning a living. And so what happens is that these individuals, primarily the women, you don't see this a lot with the men, but primarily the women basically have daddy government. And so you basically have to beat daddy government in terms of what you bring to the table in terms of finances. And then on top of that, you have to bring good looks, because she can just go out there and sleep around because daddy government basically has all of the finances taken care of. So there's nothing for her to compete against. All the competition is against you here in the States. When you go abroad, you don't see social programs to that extent, especially in Latin American countries. Like if you go out to DR, if you go out to Buenos Aires, if you go out to places like Colombia, if you go out to places like Brazil, you do not see social programs like you do here. Out there, they got to compete. And if they're looking for a man who has resources, you best believe that they compete for those men, because those men are few and far between by comparison to here in the States, where literally you have the bar for women who are being propped up is so high that for your average man who's earning a salary, I mean, if you're a guy who's earning, 30, 40,000 a year, like, she's not going to look at you, because a lot of what she earns from the government outweighs what you bring to the table, which is why in the Black community you see so much fornication and single motherhood, because there's no reason to become dependent upon a man, because then you lose all of the benefits that the government gives you, because then the government says, well, you've got a man in the home, and now you're basically taking an L as a woman, because now you're losing all of those social programs. And that's why you see a lot of fornication and single motherhood is so rampant within the community, because the government basically takes care of them, and then they just rotate through different men that they find attractive. That does not exist within a lot of other countries. So what they're referring to does not even exist. The women out there in different countries have to compete for men of means. It's not like it is in here in the States, where a large portion of these women, you see what's been going on, where most of the women who basically have lost their jobs, most of the city jobs, I did a video on that before, most of the city jobs that were lost, and most of these city jobs have overinflated salaries. Vast, overwhelming number of them were women. You have a lot of these women that are being propped up by society with these pay, like, Coach Greg Adams did a video talking about that. I think it was like 90% of a lot of the women who lost their jobs via the public sector. And people who work in the public sector earn way too much money by comparison to what you earn out here in the private sector.
That's the number one problem. The guy that said, see, what a lot of young men don't understand, Oshey, is what you are what you are, and it comes from how you feel about yourself. And women can detect that no matter, again, what country they're in. So if you're saying that Black women in the States are bad because of all these things, this game has nothing to do with women. It's all about the individual that complains about the women.
And I would say also, as typically most people stay within their own race, right? Hispanics date Hispanics, whites primarily date whites, blacks primarily date blacks, etc. Will people intermingle within the races? Sure, but it's on a very low scale. And so typically what you see is, like I said in the very beginning of the video, because you have obesity is so high. And of course, obesity is very high within the Black community. And because women don't have to, like I said, because women don't have to compete for resources because they're propped up by the government, it also hinders them from competing in the dating pool. And so as a result of feeling that they don't need to compete in a dating pool because they're taken care of financially by the government, it leads to weight gain just by nature. And many of these women live typically in impoverished areas, which further increases their likelihood of being obese. And so as a Black man, if you're a Black man who is on his grind, the amount of attractive Black fit women that you will come across will be few and far between. And so then not only do you have to compete for these women as a Black man, but then you have these you have Hispanics that might be interested, you have white men that might be interested, and depending upon the female mindset, whether she thinks Black men are shit, and she only wants to date white men, which Oshey loves to talk about, women who love to swirl, that makes it even harder for Black men to basically have a relationship with an attractive Black woman without things going south very quickly. In other countries, it's not like that. In other countries, you will meet 18-year-old girls who are looking for a husband. Facts. That's just facts. You will meet 18, 19, and they're in college. They're in school studying to get a job. And most of these women, will you come across women that are just looking to date? Sure. Will you come across women who sleep around? That's everywhere on the planet, right? But the mindset of many of these women is very different when they come across a man that they find interested in, especially an older man. These women are out here, know you have resources. It's old school back there. It's not like it is here. Here, women are propped up to shit. That's just the reality. Women are so propped up here in America that as a result of being so propped up via the extraction of resources from men, it makes it needlessly difficult to find a woman who is attractive. And then on top of that, then you got to worry about getting divorced. It's not worth it. It's not like that overseas. It's not like that overseas. For many of these men who haven't done any traveling like that, especially if you can't pull women just off of how you look, then of course this is the mindset that many of these women, that many of these dudes are going to have, thinking, are there women that are going to use men? Yes, just like there are men that are going to use women. But that isn't the norm. That's not the norm. The way that, at least the way that they want to talk about it. This video goes on to state some further rhetoric that is not rooted in any sort of logic. It's more fear. It's more fear mongering and basically shaming tactics. I'll leave the link if you haven't seen it. But realistically speaking, when you look in the Bible way back, who was it? Abraham. When he had his son Isaac, the Bible says that where they were living at the time, Abraham was looking for a wife for his son. And the Bible says that Abraham had to travel very far back to his homeland to find a wife for his son, because the women in the area where they were staying, they weren't worshipers of the Lord, and he wanted him to have a wife who served God. And so to do that, he had to go, he prayed about the situation, and he basically traveled a long distance. It's not like today where we've had planes and cars, etc. These people were traveling typically on foot and by donkey. So for them to make that sort of a travel took quite some time, but it was worth it for them because they wanted women. He wanted a woman for his son who was going to be a good wife. And so as a result, he decided traveling was the best thing to do to go back to his homeland. And for many of you men, that might be the solution. Of course, you should never want to bring them back here, right? Your goal should be to work, especially if you're a young man. Your goal should be to work, build up some sort of investment, trying to create passive income, start a business that you can do either in your new homeland or have some sort of investment, whether you buy real estate in a foreign land. And of course, they go into stuff about how much it costs to travel. I mean, that's irrelevant. If you're on your grind and you're making a solid living, who cares if you're paying, $1,000 or $1,500 to travel? That's part of life. As a man, you should be used to traveling. That should be once you start having money in your pocket, you should want to see the world just by nature. That's one of the beautiful things about being able to travel. To say that you're traveling solely for sex, do some men do that? Sure. Have I come across them? Yes. When I was in, you go to places like Cartagena or you go to places like Medellin, I've come across primarily older white men who are out there chasing young women who are paying for it, and young black men in Medellin who are paying for it. That doesn't mean that has to be you, and I don't recommend that. It doesn't mean that that's the majority of what you're going to find. That is pretty few and far between. If you're looking for a decent woman, there's so many of them out there looking for relationships. But I would not take the shaming tactics of these individuals to heart. There's a lot out there. Don't be afraid to explore, and you might be surprised what you come across and find.